American, yes, but bigger than that. Spitting opinions, rooted in facts. Hope you aware the culture is bigger than plats. Used to be a summit, now we got a podcast. Gave you something, you ain't know you want it. Black American podcast, Black American podcast. You might hear something.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us. We're Black at It again. This is Black America Summit, and we're in the second year. So I'm going to take a few minutes just to introduce our panelists, and we'll get right into it. We have Dr. Andrea Headley. Please wave to the camera, say hi. And we have attorney Darnell T. Barton.
Hello,
Thank you. Hi. So I'm going to start with Dr. Andrea M. Headley, and I will read your bio for the audience that is watching. So Dr. Andrea M. Headley is a criminal justice policy and racial equity scholar. She's an assistant professor at the McCart School of Public Policy at Georgetown University and a visiting scholar of race, policing, and crime at the National Police Foundation. She focuses within the context of policing to identify and locate negative and adverse outcomes, as well as to understand the organizational, managerial, and individual level causes and consequences of such outcomes. Thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Headley. I will read Darnell Barton's intro. Darnell T. Barton is one of the rising stars in the Michigan legal community. After the death of Trayvon Martin, Mr. Barton felt compelled to bring more awareness to the plight of young Black men and those disproportionately affected by what seemed to be an unjust system. During law school, Mr. Barton sharpened his trial skills as a member of the Board of Advocates and the mock trial traveling team. He also completed a fellowship working with Dulles County elected officials to combat the school to prison pipeline. Thank you so much for joining us, Darnell T. Barton. We also have attorney David Robinson. I will read the bio for attorney David Robinson. Member State Bar of Michigan, Association for Justice National Lawyers Guild, Michigan Chapter Executive Board. David served the Detroit Police Department for 13 years as legal advisor to the department. He also defended officers in civil litigation. As part of his responsibilities, he was required to teach the legal section to recruits in the Detroit Metropolitan Police Academy. Thank you also for being here and having this conversation about police reform, what your position is on police reform after this year of conversations that we've had focused on police reform and abolition. And we want to have you here to explore what has happened over the past year and the current state of affairs and public opinion, as well as the movement. So why don't we have you all start off by stating what your position is on police reform and maybe giving us an introduction of or a definition of what police reform means to each of you.
Doctor, please. I'm honored to be on the panel with you. Please, you go first.
Oh, thank you. So I think for me, police reform, it's definitely a convoluted term, right? I don't think there's one single thing that it means to me, but I think generally speaking, when I think about it, for me, it means, how can we get to a place where we are living in healthy, thriving, safe communities, whether that's with or without the police. I don't think I have a hard stand on police abolition thus far, but I do think from an evidence perspective, we know the harms that policing practices have historically and contemporarily kind of caused Black and brown communities. And we know that there are alternatives to policing and the carceral system as a whole that are also effective means for reducing crime and for having kind of real thriving, healthy, vibrant Black and brown communities. And so I think I try to take a more evidence-based perspective when talking about this topic as a whole. But I think in terms of the current state of where we are with police reform, I think it really depends on where you're located, right? So at the national level, because of the way in which our criminal justice system is organized and really the nature of government in the United States as a whole, focusing specifically here in the States, we know that the federal government has limited power in terms of what it can do at a local level for really impacting police behavior. That said, things like the Justice and Floyd Policing Act, which I won't go into too much, I'll leave it to my attorney friends to do that. But things like that, I think, definitely make a mark for police accountability, but there's still a lot left up to local and state jurisdictions. And so I think across the states, we see there's a variety of things that different places are trying. And so we've seen certain places actually invest more in policing, and we've seen other places try to really divert funds, right, whether you want to call it defunding or reinvesting or what have you, into alternative community health approaches, violence interruption and things like that. And so I will stop here, but that's kind of my real high level take on police reform. Darnell, I'll turn it over to you.
I think that's it. We're done. Everybody just pack. We're good to go. No, I kid, because I was shaking my head the entire time. Like, I totally agree. When you say police reform, to me, I always think of like the individual officers versus the system of policing. So I have a problem with the system of policing. A lot of the individual officers, come from poor communities, whether white, black, or whatever, trying to make it to middle class status. So essentially, it's in my opinion, it's like the war versus the rich versus the poor, and they're having poor people combat each other. So, whenever you deal with an officer, you respect the work that they're doing, but at the same time, you understand, like, most of these gentlemen or women are just trying to make it, as far as financially. So now let's go into the system of policing. Now there's that thin blue line, and there's that opportunity for them to break that code. And some individual officers don't take that. Most do not take that. But there are, and I will go into what Dr. Headley said, there's certain locales where you will see, like Detroit. DPD out here, is different when you go 20 miles up the road to Bloomfield Township or something like that, just how they deal with people. Some of the officers here, they're from the neighborhood, or, so they know what's going on. So I'm big on community policing. I don't want to ramble too much, because it's such a broad topic. We could go all day, but I will say this: I'm big on community policing more so than having government agents, perusing the neighborhood, watching people, or things of that nature. So community policing to me is us getting involved in our own communities.
Darnell, Barton, thank you so much for bringing the question of community up, because that's sort of the next thing that I wanted to touch base on. And thank you so much for both those nuanced perspectives on what the catch-all phrase of police reform might mean in different circumstances. In your communities, professional, personal, what are your community members seeking to understand this very challenging topic, and what has it looked like for people to try to understand and try to suss out and try to study and seek police reform as a catch-all term, given the nuance that you both just gave? And Dr. Headley, when I start with you, and then we'll turn it over to Darnell. Barton.
I was hoping we started with Darnell this time, but I'll go ahead.
You want me to take it, Doc? I don't mind.
We can go whichever way you'd like. So if Darnell would love. Okay, great.
I was joking. I'm interested.
Yeah, so I think when we say community, I appreciate, Vicky, kind of you saying both professional community and kind of, community on the ground. I do think of them as a bit separate. And so I'll talk about the professional community first. And so I think from the academic standpoint, when I, attend conferences or what have you, with people who are study policing, people who are criminologists or studying policing from different academic lens, oftentimes in the debate around police reform, what we're trying to figure out is, well, what do we know about what works? And really, we know very little. Well, we know that a lot of things don't work in terms of police reform, right? And so we can go through the evidence on body cameras, to civilian review boards, to use of force standards. And there's some promising evidence, and then there's evidence that just shows that it's not effective, right? And again, it really depends on where it is, what's happening, the specific nuances. And so I think from an evidence-based perspective in professional communities, we're trying to focus on, if we're going to be recommending these potential solutions, quote unquote, then we hope it would have an impact. And what do we know about whether it has an impact or not? I think for when we think about people who have lived experiences, though, in Black and Brown communities, right? When we think about them, I think that for I'm in DC. I am new to DC, and so I won't pretend to speak to all of the nuances that are here in DC as a newbie. But from what I do know about the research that I've done kind of in lots of Black and Brown communities across the United States, is that it goes back to the point that I made before, is like, people just want to be safe, right? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, we all want to be able to live in an environment where we feel we're safe from harm, where we're getting the education, the housing support, the investments that we need, that we don't have to worry about our kids going outside and something happening to them, right? We don't want to worry about government, harming our children or ourselves or our bodies or discriminating against us, right? I think at the end of the day, that's really the desire that is birthed, I think, that births the drive for police reform, whether that's wherever you are on the spectrum, from abolition to more, incremental kind of change over time. I think that's really where it comes from. But I guess what I will say is, I think that there is still a lot of appetite for what Darnell said, in terms of when we think about community-driven policing, community safety, right? Moving from the institution of policing or the institution of criminal justice and thinking about how we can protect, invest, in our own communities. I think there's a lot of appetite for that.
Absolutely. And I'll just jump. I hate when people say, let me piggyback on that. I always like, get that person out of the meeting. Like, God. Anyway, here I go saying it anyway. But I will agree. And let me say this. I always, because you mentioned the community and economy, and that's really what it gets down to for me when I think of policing. Because the police are there to protect property, not really you. They respond to things that happen to you, but they're there to protect the property. And that's really the history of them. And since we were the property, So the next thing is how do we now make it financially, or what's the financial incentive for them to lay off us, basically? That's really where we got to get to. And that comes to us utilizing our money in a proper way. What do they say, like $9 trillion we have in spending or something like that? Like that, spending money in the Black community, making sure the dollars circulate so that we own these properties, so that the police protect our property. Those are our properties, and therefore they are in turn working for us. So we say, hey, this is how we want to enforce our property because we own it. So that's one of the things. The second thing is which is most important, because many of the smaller communities are not going to be able to raise the money to be a threat to what I would call white supremacy, because it's not the police. The police are just a form or a unit that are used by different groups, whether it's us or someone else. So who's paying them at this point? My opinion is white supremacy. But anyway, the system of police. But anyway, so what is important right now for those communities that can't afford to combat them in a financial sense, it is using the legal sense. So we need community supervision boards with subpoena power. If they don't have subpoena power, it's you and your auntie and uncle up there talking all night, okay? We need subpoena power. You need to be able to bring an officer into court and say, did you do this? By the way, if you lie, you fall under the risk of perjury. So, that will change. People's insurance companies for these officers will change. Insurance companies for these precincts will change, et cetera, et cetera. So, if you trace back to the money, that'll kind of help us a little bit. But if you don't have the money, the policing power and using the legislation against bad officers and bad policing systems.
Can I add, just before we go to the next question?
Absolutely. I was about to ask for your thoughts on that, Dr. Headley, but feel free to jump in whenever you'd like.
Thank you. And so I think the kind of thinking about economy and money is important for a variety of reasons. And so not just what Darnell said, but if I could add to that, right? Oftentimes, I think the rebuts that we hear about why we need police is because of crime. And now with violent crime or gun shootings in particular, kind of higher than they were in more recent years, although still at a pretty, low level if we think about historical gun violence, that's been used as a kind of impetus to talk about why we still need police, for instance, right? And gun violence is something that has plagued Black and brown communities for decades, right? It's not new. But if we think about why gun violence is concentrated in certain areas, why people commit crime, right, it also goes back to usually economic factors, right? Communities that have been disinvested in, that are, living in poverty, that don't have the resources that they need, right? And so it really boils down to not only, as Darnell would put it, as like when we think about the importance of economy and how we could use that as kind of building not necessarily a threat to policing, but at least a force, right, to engage with this dominant power. It also helps to remove some power, right, if it also kind of gets at what we know are some of the root causes of why people engage in crime in the first place, right, because they don't have their basic needs met. And those are often due to historical policies and practices that have been in place to intentionally, disinvest in certain communities and groups of people, right? I think we have pretty good research and history on that. And so I think that that's also important to think about when we're talking about this conversation.
I just wanted to say, I don't want to combat policing. It's bad policing, because we are going to need some individuals, preferably people from our community, to stand up, protect our women and children and other individuals. So we will need that. But I mean bad policing. So I apologize for interrupting you, but because I agreed 100% what you said. That was great.
No, that's a great clarification. Yeah, for sure. And okay, one other thing, since this is a conversation, one thing that I think about too, right, particularly because as Darnell was saying, right, when we think about systems of oppression, whether that's white supremacy, right, or whatever you want to call it, systemic racism or what have you, those systems manifest in different ways. And policing is the one we're talking about today, but they also manifest in housing and healthcare and all of these other services. And so when the conversation on police reform that's talking about, community-based alternatives, it's talking about shifting to social works, health-based approaches, it's also important to keep these conversations in mind because systemic oppression and racism perpetuates in all of these systems, right? And so when we all shift to new systems, although it's not the same types of harm, it may not be bodily physical harm, right, which is good, there's still other forms of harm that can be perpetuated if we're not really clear and intentional about how we're trying to use and design these new systems.
Amazing. Thank you so much for all of those perspectives. And I see Darnell, Barton clapping and Dr. Headley clapping. There's nothing to do but clap and snap. Thank you so much for bringing the conversation of historic, economic, financial, legal factors that need to be considered in this conversation. And I just wanted to hear your perspectives on what you think about the public conversation surrounding police reform and how it has changed over the past year, and whether you see these factors that you were discussing just now being factored in, and what you'd like to see the conversation, the direction that you see the conversation go.
I'll jump on this one first. So I guess you would say the conversation, I guess at that time when it was really boiling up, was very confrontational, and understandably so. We are, in fact, we were mad. Some of us are still mad. However, I think it's dying down a little bit. Maybe the rhetoric died down a bit, which is, it's kind of, and I'm sorry to kind of be on the fence here, but maybe it's because I'm closer. I'm a millennial too, I guess. I don't know. So I'm kind of in this position where I feel I understand the young people who are saying, no, F that. We're tired, defund the police, and we want the rhetoric to speak on that. And we want it to be harsh, and we want it to be in your face and brash. And so I understand that, because we don't have, we've done the niceties. Okay. We're pissed off, and we don't have time and we're not going to sit here and be oppressed. So deal with it. You're the one oppressing us. We're not going to capitulate to you. So I understand that. Then I understand on the other side, you have kind of like this older generation, maybe like that boomer generation also, who are saying, you know, look, we're here in the legislature. We can try our best to make whatever possible that you're trying to do. However, you need to understand there are certain parameters in place, and there's all they thought of this stuff. They thought of this. So you have to know there's it's chess, not checkers. And essentially there's this impasse with us in our community as far as how do we approach this? Do we take it the nice way, or do we say, you know, do we go like Tupac? He said, you know, banging on the door, you know, we're hungry, let us in. So I'm a little on the fence, but if I always had to choose, I'm always going to go with the more radical side. So I'm always for banging on the fence, like, hey, let us in. So I think I commend and appreciate the young people that were out there protesting. We had our time that we did that. So you are a necessary component of the civil rights movement. There is a next component that you need to be paying attention to and understanding and learning from people like Dr. Headley and all these other people. But you're doing your part by, as they say, turning up. We need you to turn up respectfully to the community, respectfully to us. Okay. So anyway, I'm sorry if I rambled a bit, but I'm still on the fence.
That's totally fine. I love what you said about turning up respectfully, because I think it sort of illustrates very well you're straddling the fence of there is this perspective of being nicer, and there's this perspective that's saying police should go.
Can I say, I apologize for interrupting. Can I use this one example, right? So it's like for the younger people who are gang affiliated, we deal with a lot of different individuals. We have like Ceasefire, we have former gang members that help young men. So we always talk to some of the gang members, and we talk to them like, yo, listen, if your OG says this person's off limits and you go and press that person, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen? So we need to respect the OGs in our community. We need to educate them on stuff. Hey, OG, listen, this is what's happening out here. You're not on the corners. You don't see what's happening. Okay, now they can make an educated response based on what we need to do as the gang. So if our community is such, we need to keep the OGs informed, get that information, and then move as such. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's all right. Thank you for that clarification and that extension to your point. Dr. Headley, any thoughts?
Yeah, and so I think I'm also on the fence. You know, I am a millennial as well, and so I think although I fight police reform from, like, you know, with the pen, if you will, and with evidence and research, right? I think that there's a part of me that totally understands and resonates with the anger. Like I get angry too, right? I'm like, this is my community, people that look like me, right? That are being impacted every day, right? Family and friends and all of that, you know? And so I totally understand where the anger comes from and why it's expressed in different ways. And I think it needs to be expressed in different ways if we're really going to try to make any change, right? And oftentimes it is, you know, like the people who are protesting on the streets or what have you that bring enough attention so that the people who are in decision-making positions or, you know, in making laws or trying to advocate can then have the floor to do so, right? And so I think it's important that we have people on all kind of sides of the spectrum doing this work in the different ways with the different skill sets that they have. That said, though, in terms of how it's changed this over the last year, I think it is something that I have thought a lot about, and I struggle with a simple answer because I think sometimes we talk about the Black community as a monolithic group, and I think Darnell's points, even just about the generational differences, point out how it's not, right? That there's generational differences. There's differences with the Black community who are immigrants versus the Black community who are, you know, native born or what have you, right? And how they want to approach police reform. You know, we can all agree on the problem and know that this is a problem, and then have different ways in terms of trying to go about it. And so I think we've seen, particularly, again, going back to the narratives, and not just the narratives, but the realities of, you know, violence that has been happening, particularly of late and during COVID and things like that. We see that there are more, in terms of public opinion polls, at least, that there are Black individuals in the States who are saying, no, we don't want police to go anywhere, right? And it gets back to this idea that Darnell said of like, no one wants bad policing, right? Like nobody wants police abuse and bad policing or systems of oppression, right? As opposed to just focusing on an individual officer. But again, we all want to feel protected and safe. And I think the way in which the conversation's changed is still around this idea of how to get to this safe, protected place that we want to be. But I don't know. I do wonder if we've lost some impetus. And I don't know the answer to that, and maybe it's community dependent too, like depending on where we're talking about and what's happening. But I do wonder kind of to what extent, some of the rallying for change and things like that has died down a bit, and to what extent we're going to kind of see history repeat itself, right? Police reform is not new. It dates back decades and decades and decades. We can go back to Rodney King and the Kerner Commission and commissions after that, right? And so it's not a new phenomena, right? And oftentimes there is a lot of cries for change, and sometimes there's a little bit of change made, but the system still kind of remains the same. And so I hope, and I'm hopeful that this is different, and the timing is different. But I do wonder, to what extent things maybe have died down a little.
Thank you so much for those perspectives. And Dr. Headley, I would like to piggyback off of something that you just said and sort of latch onto it and dive deeper into it. I like what you said about the Black community not being a monolith. Bad policing particularly affects different areas and different communities of Black people differently. And so Darnell, Barton, you can speak to the legal aspect of this, and Dr. Headley, you can speak to the academic research-based aspect of this, but we wanted to know how heavy policing sort of impacts minority communities within Black America. So people who may be part of the LGBTQIA community, women, immigrants as well. Would you love to speak to what we see and how differently it impacts those communities?
Take it away, Darnell.
Okay, I got you. So I was literally writing it down so I didn't forget. Why? Because when you were talking, I'm listening. Like, all right, let's go. So let me make sure I understood the question correctly. You said how heavy policing has impacted certain sections within our community. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. I think whenever conversations about police reform, especially over the past year that we've had, the conversation has sort of surrounded on a specific area or a specific subset of the Black community, mainly Black men. And we just wanted to know what research and what your legal experience has sort of shown you about how differently it impacts those communities.
Absolutely. So I'm sorry, I was writing it down because each one has its own dynamic. So please allow me to state it briefly. If I start talking too long, tell me to move on. So I'm going to go with the LBGT community, then I'm going to go with Black women, and then I'm going to go with Black men. And obviously the kids are affected through all this, right? So the LBGT community, and this is just from my experience, I'm not a part of that community, but I support anti-oppression. So I'm all about not oppressing anyone. No reason you should be oppressed based on your preference. So anyway, here we go. It affects them, heavy policing affects them, a section of that community when it comes to how they deal with domestic violence in that community, how they deal with alleged prostitution in that community, and how they deal with drug use in that community. Now, the drug use and the drug use, it spans for all three sections that I'm talking about. So the LBGT community, Black women, and Black men. So how over-policing hurts those three entities speaks for itself. It's ridiculous. So with Black women, when we talk about Black women with over-policing, you have, for example, which is I'm gonna give a different example, right? So you have, I was a former prosecutor. I don't want to get into the whole thing. I went to go be behind the scenes and make sure they were doing the right thing. Long story short, I ran the domestic violence court for a little while, and I've seen so many cases. I've seen cases where a lot of cases where the woman was coming and saying, listen, this is too much for my family. Like it wasn't even that serious. It was this and that. Well, ma'am, I understand, but it's in the system now. We have to do X, Y, and Z. There has to be certain things that have to be done. So even if you feel this way, there are other women who are doing this because they're still enduring this abuse and they just want to get it over with. Well, it's going to keep occurring, sis, and we need to address that so you can truly protect your family. So the over policing will be the fact that they won't even try and get this young man. I'm just assuming in this case, but there were female defendants in other cases, but realistically, we're talking about a lot of young brothers here. This young man needs help because he's going to do this to another young lady somewhere else. We can't just throw him in a box and then it's over with. What are we doing? There's a family unit here, and in most of these cases, there's children involved. So I have a young man right now. I just left that's why I was running from court just now, and I apologize for coming late. Same thing. His the complaining witness's mother, meaning the young lady who is the complainant, her mother appeared. She's calling me profusely. She's calling, but she says, look, they're young people. They're doing dumb stuff. Excuse my language. They're doing dumb stuff. But this young man is about to face 5 years in jail because of his past being stupid. And now he's in here. He's working. He pays the bills. He's doing all this. And then he's stupid and he put his hands on this woman. What are you doing? But does he need to go to jail for 5 years for this? So when you say how it's affecting Black women, she's got 2 kids every day waking up. Anybody who has kids, man, please. It's not easy. So now she's got to do this every day on her own. And she didn't do anything. She was the victim. So how does it affect Black women? I got a whole book on that. We can do that. Black men, the obvious that we're going into prisons, we're going into these jails, etc. But what we don't see is the economic effect. When you come out of there, you still owe restitution in most cases. You still owe these money. So when they're having issues seeing their kids and child support or whatever's coming at them, and the baby mom is like, yo, what's popping? I got bills to pay. Give me some money for the kids to eat, which is realistic. They have to eat. He's saying, man, I got restitution. I got prison fees. I got all these other things. And they will come and put him back in jail. Now he's in jail. He gets back out of jail. He has a record. How do you get a job? It's not easy. Yeah, it's possible. Oh, I know somebody who went to jail and had a job. Yeah, there's people who have not been in jail and can't get a job. It's hard. It's not easy. And now with this pandemic or whatever have you. So anyway, last thing, we already know the kids. The kids are the most affected. When I see these videos of the officers playing basketball with the kids and stuff like that, of course I love to see, anybody enjoying kids. Yeah, that's great. But I always get upset immediately after that because I'm thinking those aren't the kids you need to be dealing with. You need to be dealing with the kids whose parents are locked up and showing up, helping their parent get help, like show the video of you in prison with their parent reading a book, going through breathing exercises, like whatever it is, like a montage of you actually helping the community, because going to play basketball with these kids is not giving these kids a good perception of you when 20 minutes later they're going to walk to the store and seeing somebody get arrested in a manner that we probably would think is not right. You know what I mean? Even though we don't know the circumstances. So sorry for rambling, but heavy policing harshly impacts our community.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that. Absolutely. Go ahead. Go ahead, Dr. Headley.
Sorry about that. I would totally agree. I think that it definitely impacts the entire community, right? From, people with different identities within the Black community to the youth. I mean, I won't, kind of belabor the point about the youth, but I could not agree more that we really need to talk about the ways in which it impacts youth, not just from, like physical impacts, but like psychological harms, trauma, mental health, like so many different ways, emotional well-being, right, that it impacts. But the one point I think that I would just add, because I think Darnell did a good job providing examples, is that unfortunately, it's so hard to document the way in which, from a research perspective. And so also let me differentiate between like my quantitative hat when we want numbers and stats versus like kind of qualitative narrative, storytelling, et cetera, right? I'm someone who values both as data, but more often than not, people kind of skew towards wanting to see the numbers and stats. And so I think from that perspective, we don't do a good job in terms of actually being able to identify people who have so many different kind of identities that they identify with in the Black community, right? And so when we think about LGBTQ, plus communities, right, the way in which they're kind of, gendered or sexualized or what have you, like is often based on the police officer's kind of assessment of whatever they think that person is, right? And so it's so hard to even start unpacking the ways in which these harms are different for different subgroups within the Black community, because we don't respect identities enough to even start documenting that. But from more of the kind of storytelling narrative perspective, I think we do see that there are clear ways in which, specifically thinking about people who have different gender or sexual identities, the way in which not only do they kind of sometimes experience the same types of like general policing harms from arrest and use of force, but then because they are often dehumanized or their identities are shamed or what have you, right, that there's an additional layer because of the intersectional identity that they have, right? And so, and I don't think we even have good ways of capturing some of those non-material harms of policing, right? But I think generally we do know that the harms extend beyond just whether or not you have a criminal record, right? It extends into, the whether or not you can get a job, the types of, public benefits that you have access to, the, places maybe that you may or may not live because of your immigrant status. There's some really great research that talks about the way in which immigrant community members kind of try to take signals based on where they think too much police activity is neighborhoods when trying to decide where to live, because they're so nervous about their status, right? And not being harassed or deported or whatever the case is, right? And so it bleeds into all of these different areas, of public life, from civic engagement and onwards. And I think those compound or get more nuanced depending on the specific, communities within the Black community that you're talking about.
Great point.
I see Darnell, yes, I see Darnell nodding his head. There are so many great points and so many different ways of looking at the quantitative and the narrative aspects of it. And thank you for bringing both aspects of those conversations into this one.
Can I, Ms. Vicky,
Absolutely.
I apologize. I just wanted to, because
this is a conversation. It should be going back and forth.
Is it Dr. Headley? Because I want to pronounce your name properly and respect.
Dr. Headley.
Headley. Okay, I just
Headley.
wanted to make sure I was saying it right, because I want, listen, all we have is our name, So you brought up a great point about like how we can't even there's no way of quantifying the actual harms in certain cases, especially with the LGBT community and also women. And where I'm going with this is there's a lot of sexual repression, sexual tension, a lot of sexual mischievousness when it comes to certain officers in dealing with the LGBT community and women. So, I mean, I'm 1,000% sure every woman has dealt with an officer and, felt like he pulled you over because he was really trying to holler at you or something like that. That happens a lot. And even if it's just your perception, the fact that that is a perception to have is a problem. So I'm sorry to cut you off, but I just wanted to say you can't quantify that. How many times can you say? It's almost like when you say racism nowadays. It's like, how can you quantify it? Like he didn't have a KKK sign up, so he's not racist. Like, okay.
Thank you for hammering that point home, because a lot of those things do often go unseen and uncaptured and unaddressed. So thank you both for hammering that home. To pivot entirely and sort of a more uplifting note, I hope, I'd like you both to talk about how you see us getting to a point where whatever system is used, whatever system of policing that is used, both ensures that our communities are safe. Dr. Headley, what you were talking about. Mental health concerns are addressed as appropriately as well as crime that needs to be addressed. How do you see us getting to that point, and what concerns do you see coming up when there's an immediate or drastic reducing or eliminating the present function of police? And I think, Dr. Headley, you might have touched on this, on replacing current policing with social service work and the problems that might bring. Do you have any more explorations that you might want to provide? I think I'll start with Dr. Headley this time. Thank you for correcting my pronunciation.
No, it's fine. And so I am a huge proponent of social services, right, and the importance of it. And so I will say, like, although I think my point is that we should never just think, right, that all of a sudden, you know, racism or oppression is going to disappear because we put it in a new system. But I think, and I do think that there are people in the Black community who are having these conversations and are being really intentional about trying to make sure, you know, if we're going to have violence interrupters or social workers, like, let it be people from our community, like Darnell said. Let it be people who are trained, you know, with trauma-informed, practices or whatever the case is, you know. And so I think these conversations are being held, but I think it's important to continue to kind of ring the alarm so that in 20 years, we're not like, oh crap, like we created this new system and here we all are all again in like institutionalized or whatever the case may be, right? Like, God forbid that would happen, you know. But, and so I think, though, to the point about maybe the first part of the question, if I understand correct, is thinking about kind of maybe what's promising or what's hopeful in terms of where we could go. And then maybe concerns is the latter part of the question with regards to kind of eliminating the current system. And so I think for me, one of the things that I am hopeful for is the amount of conversations that are being had at a federal level, but also in different localities about actually investing dollars in alternatives to policing, or not, even if you don't want to call it alternatives, but investing dollars in that social service provision aspect, because I do think it's important. And I think that there's clear research that shows the benefits of when you have mental health services, when you have nonprofits focusing on violence interruption, when you have substance abuse programs, when you have housing, affordable housing, you know, programs or what have you, that all of those lead to, you know, reduced crime, better outcomes and outputs, right, for communities of color and things like that. And so I'm hopeful that dollars, because I think the economy point is usually, unfortunately, in a capitalistic society, economy is kind of usually what matters the most, right? Where the dollars go, where we're investing, right? And so I think the fact that there's conversations being had and allocations being made to really support those services and support community-based, you know, public safety strategies is really promising. I think that, to me, I think that's probably one of the most hopeful avenues. And I think even at the federal level, again, like I said before, like the federal government is limited to the extent in which it makes a big dent, but the fact that they have allocated dollars to investing, you know, for localities investing in this, I think is really promising. In terms of the latter part of the question with regards to concerns with the current system, I think I agree with Darnell in the beginning when he was kind of saying that, like, you know, we do need somebody who's going to be able to like protect communities and take on that role, right? And so I do think there is a role, whether it's police as we know it or some other type of way, a role for some organization or communities to kind of make sure that you know, we are protecting ourselves and things like that. I do think that there will be a role for that, and so I don't think we can have no police departments tomorrow, right? Or even in 10 years. And maybe I am a pessimistic person and I would love to be proven wrong on this, you know? And so like, I'm all for it. But I do think that we can definitely limit the powers and authorities of policing as we know it, while also doing some of the other strategies that I've talked about already to, you know, get to a better place and really try to prevent and hold accountable bad policing practices at an organizational level as well as individual officers.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Headley. I'm going to turn it over to you, Darnell.
So let me think. Okay, hopeful. So I am like Dr. Headley. I'm hopeful that we allocate these dollars to social services or what they say alternatives to policing, or what we know as policing today. I think mental health is a huge issue, especially in our community. I'm Also, I hate when people do this and start dropping all this stuff, but I'm also the lead attorney here in 36th district, which is like the third largest district, busiest district in the nation. I'm the lead attorney for the mental health court here, and I could tell you, there should be more people in our court. There's so many people that when I was a former prosecutor that I used to send to the mental health court, and they would send them back. They're fine. Like, what? Like, there's no, you know what I mean? Like, anyway, so it's a big thing for me when it comes to mental health, because some of these individuals also have children. And so the children are suffering through the process of this parent going through not only the criminal justice system, but their mental health issues, which it's so crazy because our mental health court, the way we do, we help them with everything, like housing, we had a young man, I'm sorry to ramble real quick, but we had a young man, he was too cold in his, he worked for a supermarket thing and they kept having him go in and out. So he was going to quit his job because he was like, I'm too cold. And we're like, no, brother, we'll get you thermals. Will you go back to work if we get you thermals? Well, yeah, if I'm warm. Because in his mind, he doesn't understand, like, bro, this is it. Like, you out on the street, so your cousin ain't going to let you stay on the couch much longer. But he doesn't have the capacity to really understand that. So we as the community have to rally around him and say, hey, brother, what do you need to complete your job? Thermals? That's light. Okay, somebody go run, and we got it to him that day. So mental health, very big. Unarmed officers. We need unarmed officers, especially if we're having social work. I'm not saying every officer is unarmed. That would be stupid. What I mean is unarmed officers for specific reasons. What are we talking about? For example, somebody has a warrant out for a traffic violation. Why does that person need a weapon? It's a traffic infraction. Okay, I can't tell you how many times I had traffic issues with someone, and I'm like, I think about the process again as I'm going through, and me being a young black man myself, or young is a relative term. Y'all be nice. Anyway, I see the officer coming up to the car. You know, your heart beating. You're going through all this, blah, 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 blah. And this guy is at any moment 2 seconds away from pulling out his gun and blasting you away, whether it's justified or not. I'm not painting the picture all cops are bad. I don't really care about all that. I just care about my community. So I don't care what you guys are doing or who's bad or I don't give a shit. If he's bad and you're not bringing him out, we'll bring him out. Period. So that's that. Last thing is qualified immunity. They got to get rid of it or amend it or something so that these individual officers will have to make decisions based family decisions the same way we make family decisions. What does that mean? As and I speak from a black male perspective, but again, I'm sure black women and people from the LGBT community can speak differently, or maybe they relate exactly to this. But I always feel like I'm making a family decision when they pull me over, whether I reach for my wallet, reach for my whatever. I'm a CPL holder. So I also have to let them know, hey, there's a weapon in the car. My wife battles with that. Well, guess what? I'd rather be judged by 12. What does it say? Judged by 12 than carried by 6. But that's a risk I take every day. And I'm legal. I'm an attorney. I'm a former prosecutor. I was with the and I still have these issues. So yes, that's important to me. When they have to make a family decision, things will change. When that pension is on the line, when you could be, we saw, it was funny because I'm sorry, and I won't ramble any further after this. We saw, what's this guy's name with George Floyd? Daniel, no, what is it? Why do I blanked his name out for whatever reason. The guy who killed him or whatever. But we saw him go like this whole process. It went so smooth, and so everybody jumped on board and all this other stuff. And everybody's like, yeah, see, the system is working. And I said, what you have to understand is the fact that we had to go all through this tells you the system's not working. The fact that we even are excited that this one officer is going through this, and we can assume, or we know for a fact that these same situations happen every day in different communities, especially black communities all over. I'm sure in other communities too, but it happens in black communities all over. So we know this is happening. Where are these officers? Where are they? We need to bring them out. T.I. said, bring them out, bring them out. Let's go. Let's put these guys away because they need to be off the streets. They're dangerous. They're more dangerous than the guy they're worried about catching and apprehending. Because his auntie, the guy that we're trying to catch and apprehend, his auntie and his uncle live in that same neighborhood. You don't. So I'll leave it at that. I'm sorry. Concerns. Yeah, my concern briefly, sorry to waste time, but my concern is that I go back to that generational thing that I feel my concern is that the older generation will not communicate with the younger and vice versa. And they're going to use one of us against the other, the divide and conquer tactic. And we're going to be right back to our omnibus crime bill, like in the 80s, where we got the crack numbers up exorbitantly high, like 100 to 1. And we had people in our community who were saying, yes, that's a good idea. And now here we are a generation later with a devastated generation. I have friends, kids that we grew up with in that generation that would probably still be, if they hadn't been killed in jail or stuff like that. You know what I mean? So, I'm sorry, Hillary, calling us super predators, it still resonates. I'm that guy. We were those kids that were wilding in Central Park. I'm from New York City. We were those kids. We weren't wilding and beating up people. We didn't have no parents at home. We had no food at home. We was running around the streets because we were just, what we gonna sit in the closet? So when they characterize us like that, it gets, you see, I'm getting upset thinking about that. It's ridiculous. But that's how they painted us, and then that's how the media took it. And so now we wilding in the streets. We're super predators. So yeah, that's my concern, that we're gonna get back to that. But hopefully we don't. Hopefully we all stay woke and we don't let this inner fighting, what is it, intersectionality fighting and all, like, we gotta get over that, like, fast. The boat is sinking. Who cares who ate what on the ship? Let's go.
Can I just say two things? I know we're at time, and I know there's a question also by the audience, but I think another concern that I would say that I think is important is that even when we think about kind of at the federal policies that are being put in place, or at least talked about, in order to address violent crime and then also hold police accountable, one of the things, while I was definitely optimistic about Biden's kind of plan for violent crime because it was so comprehensive and it didn't just focus on the criminal justice system, one of the things that I think was missing is that the talk about, when we measure success, we're going to measure it in terms of crime rates. And I think crime rates are an important measure, and it gets us away from arrests at least, but it's what are the measurements for problematic police behavior? It cannot just be, police shootings. I think police shootings or police killings of Black and brown bodies Black and brown individuals need to be measured, but like the harms of policing extend so much beyond that. And it's the everyday stop and frisk. It's the everyday not feeling like you can't walk to the store in peace, right? That are not necessarily, gets to the level of someone's life being taken, which is obviously, the worst outcome, but it still has devastating impacts on people, right? And so we can't just look at whether or not these strategies are impacting crime or what have you, right? But we need to also think about, are these strategies at what cost, right? What are the costs that of whatever strategies we're putting, and making sure we're really clear about trying to measure those, because oftentimes it's just the Black community has to live with the cost, right? And in terms of the larger conversation or the documentation, we don't see that. I wish we had more time to talk about qualified immunity as a whole. My one caveat with qualified immunity is that I think oftentimes people, and it's not specific to qualified immunity actually, but I think sometimes people want such a simple answer, right? Like, let's get rid of qualified immunity. Let's go to the question in the chat. Let's have Black officers, for instance. Let's just have a civilian review board. But it's like each of those accountability measures are important for very specific types of outcomes, right? So qualified immunity gets at the problematic officer, right? But if we think about what about that system now, or what about, like the behaviors that don't reach the level of deadly force, but are still really bad, right? Nobody wants to be pulled over 10 times because they're Black, regardless, And so again, like getting at, we need lots of different accountability measures to get at kind of the system that's problematic, And so I will stop there.
I just wanted to add to that great point about qualified immunity too, because we still want officers to do their job. Meaning, if we have an officer, Black officer, green officer, whatever, if somebody's trying to rob my mom, I need that officer to have in his mind that if he's doing his duty properly, he can go ahead and exchange fire or do whatever he needs to do to protect my mom. So yeah, that's why it's a nuanced argument. So people say, just get rid of qualified. It's deeper than that. You still need the officer to be able to do his job, but you don't want these bad officers to feel like, hey, anything is my job. Anything is in my jurisdiction. Like, whoa. No, it's not. So, great point, Dr. Headley.
Well, we're almost at time, and I think you've done a bit of a good job addressing the question from the audience that we have from the chat. And I'll just like to thank you so much. Thank you both for taking this time to have this conversation, and ask if you have any last words, how people can follow what you're doing, purchase a book, donate, and yeah. Just a minute for each of you. I'll start with you, Darnell, and then Dr. Headley.
Okay, I'll keep it real brief. Right now, like I said, I'm in Detroit. Come check me out on TikTok. I do a whole bunch of silly, goofy stuff on there. I love it. My clients love it. But no, I'm not selling a book, but shout out to Dr. Headley and everyone else who does have books. Please reach out and grab those things. It's important. That goes back to cycling the black dollar. Like, there's a reason why we put these books together. It's not just because we want to sell and make. There's valuable information in there, but there's also a business structure in place that allows us as these professionals to write these books and keep the information flowing. So I kind of get irritated every time we always, yeah, well, we're going to show love with me. And then it's like, hey, can you buy my book, or can you come to my show, or can you, whatever it is. And then, and then they show up with something from dominant culture or something like, a Fendi bag. It's like, come on, man, really? Like that? You giving it to Fendi or whoever? Like, it could be a dude. You giving it to Jordan, you giving it to Nike, bro? You could come to my concert? Really? So anyway, just check me out there. Like I said, if you're in Detroit, or if you have family in Detroit or whatever have you, tell them to hit me up, because we don't just do criminal defense at my firm. We also do civil litigation, landlord tenant stuff. We really just try to protect the community. And if I don't have the capacity to do it, I get you to whoever you need. But we're here for the community. Thank you so much for having me, guys. I appreciate you. Dr. Headley, it was an honor to be on the stage with you. And Vicky, thank you so much for having me. I'll be quiet now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving us your perspective. Dr. Headley, any last words?
Yeah, and so I'd also just like to thank you all for having me. I think it was a great conversation, and I love all being able to do panels that are not just academic audiences, where I get to engage with different people. And so I'm glad I got to share the stage with attorney Barton, and maybe there'll be a Barton and Headley book one day. Put a pin in it, and we'll shout out Black America Summit.
Hey, not to cut you, doctor, but all jokes aside, I'm actually in DC for a mental health conference. I think it's next week. I don't even know, but I'll definitely try and get your email information.
Yeah, definitely.
That's okay.
Yeah, for sure. And so, yeah, I guess I am not as cool as Darnell, so I don't have TikTok or anything, but I have Twitter. And people can feel free to reach me, though, kind of via email or my website. I saw someone ask for, I think, Darnell's TikTok in the chat. And so I don't know if we can put that in there, but if someone can put that in there.
I'm sorry. I don't even know how to add the chat. I don't know where it is, but my TikTok is Barton Law, PLLC. So you can email me or go to my website. It's bartonlawpllc.com. That's BARTONLAW. P as in Paul, L as in Larry, L as in Larry, C as in Charles.com. Thank you, guys. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine.
You actually have a product on the market ready to go.
No. I think the last thing, though, I would say is just thank you all to everyone who's listening, the audience, and everyone who's interested in this topic and interested in kind of keeping the fight alive and doing, continuing this work, right? I think it's important that we're all in different spheres doing this work. And it's important that we all kind of encourage each other, right? This is tiring work. Black joy matters. Happiness matters. We need to sustain ourselves, right? To be able to do this in our respective realms. And so I think that's important. But other than that, I will turn it back over to you, Vicky.
Well, thank you. Thank you both. I cannot begin to express how thankful we are for you both taking the time to have this conversation and to talk through this. And I loved seeing the interpersonal dynamics that we just observed. You're going to be in DC, you're going to meet up, you're going to write a book. We would love to see it. It's a great segue into our next section for people who are going to be joining us in our next section. It's titled Healthy Community Dynamics, that you just saw on display between Dr. Headley and Darnell Barton just now. So make sure to join us, and we'll see you in the next section. Thank you so much again.